So, faith and doubt. It's very easy to think that faith is very positive and very good and we should have faith. And I'm not saying to do with Christianity, I mean in general terms, but doubt is very negative. I don't see it quite like that, really. After all, if we think today of things that come on the television news and things about politicians, I'm not going to make any party political comments, that would be completely inappropriate, but in this country, one politician will stand up and say such and such, and we think, what? You know, what rubbish, you know? Or politicians around the world. And politicians, like any of us, from time to time get discredited anyway. And we can't always be certain that, you know, they're saying it how it really is because they want to convince us and so on and so forth. So to have doubt can be positive if we do our utmost to find out what the real situation is, what the actual truth is. It certainly wouldn't be good never to doubt, because that would mean that we could believe that situation, believe what that person says, not question it, just take everything at face value, and it could get us into a whole load of difficulties and all the rest of it. So we need to test these things. And I often feel rather sorry that I think the Apostle Thomas, he gets a bit of a bad press, because when some of his friends had seen Jesus raised from the dead and he hadn't been there at the time, and so he hadn't witnessed seeing Jesus, and he doubted, well, I'm not a bit surprised, wouldn't we all really, because it's not something that, as it were, happens ordinarily. They'd seen Jesus on the cross. You don't survive that. He was very dead when he was taken down from the cross and when he was, you know, put in the tomb and all the rest of it. No doubt at all, physically he was, you know, very dead. Well, you don't think 3 days later you're going to see that person again. Whatever sort of teaching Jesus had given them and all the rest of it, in the reality, you know, you don't. So Thomas, to my way of thinking, yes, he wanted to be, he wanted to be certain himself, didn't he? He wasn't going to be taken in by just what the others said with something so unlikely. You see, doubting Thomas, it's said, isn't it, in a kind of not a very kind way, I think. But I'm very glad that Thomas doubted, because we might not have had some of the subsequent stories afterwards, and yet, you see, we've got them because, yeah, he saw Jesus. Jesus appeared to, you know, all of them and so on, and he appeared to people over, you know, a period of time. And as I say, I don't know about you, I can't understand it in physical human terms at all. Because, you know, it doesn't happen in physical human terms. And yet, like I expect all of you here, I believe it absolutely. And after all, we're over 2,000 years on, and there aren't things that are fallacies that live on for 2,000 years. People, you know, thinking it's the truth and it's not, and it affecting all their ways of life. Now, I have to be careful when I say that, because there'll be somebody much more knowledgeable than me who will quote something or other and say, but what about such and such and such and such, you see? So you can tell me, put me right on some of those things, you know, afterwards. So Thomas then saw for himself, and he believed. He believed. What about us today? How can we, when we're talking to other people, just, you know, ordinary folks, maybe our relations, maybe friends, maybe our neighbours, maybe people we meet casually in various situations and all the rest of it. And they might know that, you know, you go to church and say, well, what do you go to church for? You know, that's boring, because people may remember isolated times when they've been to church and it's been dull and all the rest of it. I hope it's not dull this morning, but you know what I mean. Well, I'm glad you laugh. You're listening anyway. And so how can we convince people? How can we prove it to people? And it's, you know, I think it's very, very difficult. You see, if we have doubt, and it's genuine doubt, and we want to find out more about something, become more knowledgeable about something, and so on and so forth, then that's not destructive. If we have doubt about something and we dismiss it completely out of hand and don't investigate and all the rest of it, well, that is destructive. So there may be some aspects of our faith that we struggle with and all the rest of it. But we can speak to others, we can look up things in the scriptures, we can pray. There's the things that we can do to try and sort of find out. And it'll get sort of proved to us and all the rest of it. I know I've told this story before, because it doesn't show me in a good light really at all. One of the A-levels I did was maths. I was never, ever, ever a mathematician. But anyway, I did it. And when it came to the exam, I struggled with the exam. So I was genuinely convinced that I hadn't passed. Well, unfortunately, the day of the afternoon of the last maths paper, who should get on the bus home and sit beside me but my maths teacher? So what did she do? She opened up her briefcase and took out the math exam papers, you know, not the ones that went off to be marked, of course, you know, but the actual papers. And I said, it was terrible. I couldn't sort of do it. So which questions did you do? She said. It was a nightmare journey, that was. 20 minutes nightmare, you see. So, you know, she sort of grilled me, really, on which questions I did and what I'd done and all the rest of it. And she shut up her briefcase and she said, yeah, I think you're right. Don't think you passed. Well, anyway, in those days, some of you remember, we didn't get grades, we got our actual percentage. Oh, none of you are old enough to remember that then. That puts me in a category all on my own, doesn't it, really? But we did. It wasn't a grade, you know, you knew exactly kind of what you got. And I just got the pass mark. So it was really, you know, so I did pass, but, you know, there you go. So I was being realistic then. I didn't have to do anything to to find out the result. It came through the post. I just had to read the post, you know, and all the rest of it. So I don't know, I really don't know how I did pass it, because I don't know how I even got the pass mark. But anyway, there you go. That doubt. Doubt can be justified sometimes. And they do adjust the marks to keep the sort of the percentage of people who get the, you know, different levels and this sort of thing consistent each year. So maybe, therefore, mine got boosted up a little bit because of that. Who knows? Who knows? Maybe they thought the paper was a bit more difficult. Oh, I thought it was impossible, really. But anyway, there we go. So, if you struggle about some things to do with your faith, don't despair. Don't despair. Investigate. Ask people who you feel know about things. Read the appropriate references in the Bible. Pray about it. I'm sure that over in our lives, for all of us, there have been and maybe still are some aspects of our faith that we struggle with. And struggling with parts of our faith can be natural, and it can be a source of growth. Because we investigate, because we read around the appropriate scriptures, because we ask other people and all the rest of it. And as we struggle through something that we are unsure of or doubt about, when we come through the other side, our faith is strengthened, as it were, as it's gone up a rung. And if you're like me, most of us started way down here, I think, And we hope that, bit by bit, we grow in our faith. And it will always be, some aspects of it, a matter of faith rather than a matter of proof. It's not like certain things in science and, you get a certain result with the experiment and that has proved such and such and all the rest of it. So faithful doubt can be positive. It's faithless doubt that can be destructive. But if we can have faith and grow in our faith, then, all the rest of it. Jesus kept coming among them. He made, there are 11 occasions, I think it is, if we count them, recorded in the New Testament when Jesus appeared to people, to Mary, to Peter, to two on the road to Emmaus, to 10 disciples altogether, to 11 disciples altogether, to James, and on one occasion, more than 500 people. Wow, that must have been absolutely amazing. Remember, Thomas said that he wouldn't believe unless he could see the nail marks in Jesus' hands and put his fingers where the nails were and put the hand in his side. Then he would believe. And then when Jesus appeared and Thomas was there as well, there was the double positive, really, because Jesus knew what he'd said, what Thomas had said. He knew what Thomas was thinking and feeling, and he addressed it before Thomas had said anything. That in itself must have been very, very powerful. And then we can sort of think in our own lives. We're not going to see these things physically 2,000 years on, but we can have proof in all sorts of other ways, and our faith can become real to us individually. Some of you will have been brought up in Christian homes and went to Sunday school or junior church from the age of 3 or 5 or something like that. Some of you may not have been near a church until you were an adult. Everybody here will have a different faith story. I mean, I first went when I was 3 months old. I don't quite remember that. That's when, it was my baptism, christening, or baby's baptism, And then I was in Sunday school from the age of 5 and went all the way through. So, I knew a lot of the Bible stories, I'd heard them, and then when we went to church in the morning, it was twice a day, went in the morning, and then the youngsters went out like they've gone out now. We were in the first part of the service, just the same. But then we had our proper Sunday school in the afternoon. You trooped down again. And yet, to actually come to a personal conviction of faith I needed a particular occasion. Now, you've heard all that before, I'm sure, so I won't bore you with that now. You can ask me over coffee if you haven't heard the story. But the trouble is, when one gets a certain age, or up to a certain age, one tends to repeat things. I mean, in our families, don't we? Don't we remember our grandparents, and then they would tell you a sort of some old story or other, and you'd sort of think, oh, that's the 5th time she's told me that, you know. So I'm of that age. So, you know, if I start telling you stories you've heard before, just put your hand up and say, we've heard that one. I will not be offended, because you probably turn off, you know, otherwise. So, as we continue through the post-Easter season, where the Bible readings tend to be the various resurrection appearances, don't turn off. Just sort of try and sort of think about it according to your own growth in faith. Because however long you've been a committed Christian, God always has something else for you. He always has something to move you on. We've never reached completion this side of the grave. There's always something else. I mean, when you read the Bible or hear it read in church, sometimes you think, oh, but I've never noticed that bit before. And there's something, even though it might be a really familiar reading that you've actually heard a lot of times, and maybe you read yourself a lot of times, some phrase, some word, some sentence will suddenly hit you anew, as it were, between the eyes, which I think is absolutely amazing and makes me sort of, you know, full of joy. And I mean, there's lots, and I think to myself, how on earth have I missed that before? I like something else that we sort of think of. I can't remember where I sort of read all this put quite like this. Trouble is, I'm now better at it, but I used to be terrible at writing down the source of where I'd got something or heard something. I'd hear something and I'd write it down, and I wouldn't, you know, when I got home or something, and I wouldn't write down who said it. And then I didn't remember who'd said it as the years went on. Or if there's, you know, a sort of a verse in scripture, and then I think to myself, oh, where is that? You get out the concordance, and you sort of, you know, look through and you think, oh, yes, of course, that's where it is. Oh, yes, that was the sort of situation. There's always something new we can learn, always something new God has got to teach us, which I think is a source of great wonder and great joy, because we've never got it all, either in our heads or in our hearts. So, as we continue through this season of where we have these resurrection stories, maybe for the next couple of weeks, you know, I don't know what Chris will do. He will do whatever he wants to do. But see if there is something new that you can see in them, something that hits you between the eyes, that helps you to grow in your faith, in your assurance, in your joy, in your peace. Because Christ is risen. He is risen indeed. Amen. Let's just have a few moments of silence. The hymn, I know that my Redeemer lives,